Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
And Alan Miller returns with Access to Democracy. Nice to have you with us, and nice to have a return guest with us, Representative Sandy Masin, District 51A.
Hello, Alan.
Who an hour ago was on the floor of the legislature as they concluded some votes for the day and raced over here, and I'm glad you made it.
Oh, thank you.
And when I spoke to Sandy last week about coming on the show, she said Friday would probably be a good day because they don't do much on Friday. And I said caustically, well, the legislature doesn't do much, period. And you took umbrage at that.
Definitely.
Because you think that we had a very successful
Absolutely.
session.
I just think we have accomplished a whole lot so far, and we still have a few weeks left to go. But I guess I originally would have counted this session as success if we at least did the bonding bill, which we know we will do, and if we pass the minimum wage, which you know we've already done that. We also were able to pass that 5% bill for the home health care workers. That was something that I really wanted us to do, but that's still kind of a wish list thing, so the fact that we did that is huge. And then I think one of the topics that has gotten a lot of press is the Women's Economic Security Act. And I carried a bill in that, and my part was about eliminating the disclosure in the hiring forms that normally you have to sign that says you will not discuss what you make or your salary with anybody.
Which is absurd.
Yes, it is, and I've always just thought it's incredibly insulting to begin with and demeaning. But the other thing that's even more important is the fact that when you think about the Lilly Ledbetter issue, the fact is with that clause in there, most women don't know what people are making, so you can't go and say that you're being treated unfairly if you can't actually have access in a legal way to the information. So that's why
Which is why women earn about 70% of what men earn for the same job.
Exactly.
Simply because that discrimination has followed us for generations.
Exactly. And I know there was the floor discussion on that was incredibly interesting because one of the more senior members was going to call out all the members that were 70 or older, and her question was going to be, has government helped you get a job? And the first person that she called on was Representative Shannon Savick. And Shannon has a very impressive background in the business world. And so, you know, the Representative Erickson had commented that she knew that. And so she said, did the government help you? And Shannon got up and said, yes, it did. And then Representative Erickson went on, kind of not really addressing the fact that Representative Savick said that that was important. And so then Representative Savick got up again, and she said, I did say the government played an important part, because when I first was looking for a job, there were certain jobs that were classified either jobs for men or jobs for women. And I remember one of the industries was in stockbrokers. a woman could not get a job as a stockbroker. She would have to start as a secretary way back when, before the laws changed that. So those are things that were, some changes have occurred over the years, but there's still a number of other issues that we're still trying to address. Because if we want everybody to reach their potential, they need to be able to make a good day's salary whenever they're working. If we're going to hit
an artificial prejudice in their way. Now, you're running again. Is that
I am.
I understand they're lining up to run against you.
There are a couple of people, yes, that I guess have not been
It's
able
funny, they always make you a target, and then you always manage to win your elections. But,
Not always, but hopefully
almost
this time.
always. So, your excuse me, your Republican opponent has not been picked yet.
Exactly. And from what I've been reading, it's I know that there will be a primary. So we'll have to wait till
So
whoever.
you won't know until August, really,
Right, exactly.
who you're running against,
But from what I've been able to
or who's
ascertain,
running against you, is
it-
what I should say.
but I guess I'm thinking they will probably be very similar on the issues regardless. So there will still be a pretty stark contrast.
It will be what it will be.
Exactly. But as I said,
But you've started your campaign for re-election. Well, actually, you never stopped it, from what I heard.
it's something like,
So-
it is getting to be a continuous process. And that's something that I think we really need to start having a public discussion about, because people do think that the legislators are part-time, should be part-time, but yet, our state has grown. There are a lot of issues that need to be taken care of. And for people that are responsible, we are putting in a lot of hours. We're only in session for a certain number of months, but the committee work and the other work that we need to do goes on.
And it really has become a year-round job,
Exactly.
certainly, and you spend a lot of time in your office, and you don't really have a staff per se. You have one legislative assistant, so.
Well, in our case, it's like, in my case, I'll just be specific here, I share somebody with another rep. So it's usually, it's a very light staff at this point. We have, and I think it is important, maybe as long as we're discussing that, we have cut down on staff at the legislature considerably. So what that does mean is our staff is working probably longer and harder because we needed the extra staff, but we are, because of budget cuts, it is a pretty intense.
Well, it's
place.
interesting because you were here a few years back, and we were talking about a $6 billion deficit that the Republican legislature had left us. And here we are a few years later, and we started this session talking about the budget surplus.
Exactly.
Now, part of that, of course, was that the economy turned around to some degree. Part of it was also better stewardship. And under Representative Thiessen, in particular, I think you have a very good steward who's leading the way in the House.
Absolutely. I think our leadership has done a really great job of trying to develop consensus as we proceed. So it is, and I think that's very important. That's not always the case. Actually, we're not going to talk too much about Washington, but I think that's part of the problem that they have in Washington, is the fact that it seems to be more top-based decisions rather than involving people, the representatives, et cetera.
So what are we doing with the surplus?
Okay, we have done a number of tax cuts, so I think that is really important. We're putting money into the reserves, and most importantly, the fact we did pay off the school shift, and that I think, that we were able to do by the end of last year.
Which, for people who don't know, was really the legislature took money that was earmarked for the schools and put it into the general fund. They borrowed it from the schools, but the schools didn't have the right to say no.
Exactly.
And it was building up to several $billions.
And I think that's the one thing that I'm really proud of. during the last year and a half is the fact that we have tried to be very responsible, and the fact that the previous legislature not only left us with a deficit, but the fact that, as you said, they did do that huge school shift, which impacted schools, and schools, when many schools had to go out and borrow money to make up that difference, and then the fact that they also took out bonds or borrowed against the tobacco monies, and that impacted the state's rating. The ratings did go down during that session. And then I think again last year, after our session was done, when they saw the way we were operating, we are getting some favorable comments from from some of the raters. And it's sounding like I'm saying ARIDER, but it's RATER, the firms that actually do the bond ratings.
Yeah.
And again, because they're thinking that what we've done has been positive, and they're looking for stability going forward. And that to me is huge. I mean, because that impacts our bonding, it impacts a whole lot of different issues. The fact is, people look at us as being a very stable government.
Now, I understand that both houses are pretty much agreed on a bonding bill.
Yes.
The governor wanted, I'm losing my voice today, $1 billion. I think you've come in a little bit less than that, but...
And I think originally somewhere it was, I think at the beginning it was going to be somewhere around 850, but as the surplus seems to be getting a little larger for one, and there does seems to be a consensus from both parties that we should be spending more money on bonding. So right now I think that's kind of what's going on, is to decide how
where
high.
does that money go?
The bonding money?
Yes.
Okay. The bonding money is used, to put it simply, to develop the state's assets. It would be going into the buildings and resources for, like, the University of Minnesota, for the Minsky systems, for many of the smaller communities. They need help putting in some of their water systems, et cetera, some of the infrastructure. So those are the main things that we're having. And then also for our area, I'm hoping that we will be getting money to be using for the overpass to go from 77 down to the Cedar Vale Transit System station. So it's definitely assets that we're looking at. And there are some museums in there as well, things that really help Minnesota and are important to our way of life.
Well, roads and bridges, especially after this winter, roads are in terrible shape, and bridges have been crumbling, if not falling. So obviously there's a need for that.
Right.
Some of these bridges are really ancient.
Yes, and
I think they were built by the Romans, but I'm not sure.
No, I mean, we should be so lucky that our roads would last that long. But many of our infrastructure are like around 50 years old, and they really need serious attention or need to be replaced. And we had hoped to get a bigger transportation bill out this year, and I'm pretty sure at this point that is not going to happen, but I would think that would be at the top of the list going into the next year's session, because there are so many transportation issues that need to be addressed. But we did put money in specifically for potholes, and I don't know if we've ever done that, but this year it's just been astronomical because we've had such a difficult winter to begin with. We're behind on a lot of our transportation projects, again, because we're not putting in the money into our transportation system the way we should.
Did something with tanning parlors. What was that?
That one, as I recall, that is mainly to make sure that children or people under 18 cannot go to get tanning, because there are some ramifications from using those.
Yeah, called cancer.
Yeah, yeah. So, and supposedly, they shouldn't have been able to use that, but they have been. So it was to make the restrictions a little bit more
Medical
rigid.
marijuana?
That one is interesting, because we did also have a rally this week for legalizing marijuana, period. I mean, and this is apart from the medical marijuana. Right now it looks like, well, definitely I don't think we're going to get around to doing the whole marijuana piece. And at this point, I would say it's pretty certain we may not get to the medical marijuana. But I know there's been a lot of pressure on that, and I know that definitely I think it's been putting pressure on the governor, because, and also I think I've heard where now people are also they know it's because the governor won't sign it because of the law enforcement being opposed to this, seriously opposed. And I've had discussions with some of our policemen as well, and they look on marijuana as being a gateway drug, and then the opponents are just saying this is a medical issue. And in so many cases, people who have had family members that are seriously ill, and usually it is things like cancer. And I think the new thing this year were the parents of children who have seizures, and that really extends the bill, and I think also the number of people that are supporting it. So I don't think this is going to go away. I think
they
we
have
won't get to it.
shown that the use of marijuana, or at least the chemicals in it, are very beneficial to these people having seizures.
Right.
I mean, they talk about it as being a gateway drug, which frankly I think is absurd. Alcohol is a gateway drug because people then become alcoholics, and not only cost us a lot of money for medical treatment, but it damages society. Smoking is addictive.
Absolutely.
And now we're first confronting e-cigarettes, which to me are full of nicotine, so it's just as bad as cigarettes. Here is a plant that apparently offers relief to people who are in extremis, dying or in having seizures, and the people I've spoken to in terms of police and really legal authorities are not opposed to that. I was very surprised that the governor was, and disappointed also, because I think where we can ease somebody's suffering without damaging anything else, it's our obligation to do so.
But, and it is, for me personally, it was a very tough decision, because you don't want to go against your law enforcement agencies. I mean, these are the people that we depend on to protect us. But yet, again, I've talked with people who have had family members that have used it. They have seen the difference that it makes, the relief that it gives. And in one testimony when I was on Public Safety Commission a couple of years ago, I mean, and it was a woman from Egan that testified about her daughter. And she said that originally they said they weren't going to do it. Some of the siblings took the young woman out of the house, and when they brought her back, the mother could see the difference. And from then on, she had made some calls to see if she could get some more, and it started appearing, I think, on her doorstep, she said. But what's important, and again, one of my friends too had a brother who had used it, but it was placing the family members in jeopardy because they could be arrested. It was because it's illegal. So that's why I finally decided I would support at least making medical marijuana legal, because you can't possibly prosecute people whose only desire is to ease somebody's suffering, and particularly when there are very little other choices left.
On the other side of the coin, Colorado is really receiving a lot of tax money from these marijuana shops that they've opened up, not just medical marijuana, but marijuana itself. And it's very interesting to me that that becomes a source of revenue.
Which that's another discussion to think about, using that as a source of revenue. But I know I was listening to one of the speeches at the rally the other day, and that very issue was brought up, that it could be a source of revenue. But I think you kind of have to take that into balance the way we try to compensate for people that are gambling or alcoholics. You're still, somewhere you're going to need to provide some extra
One thing
help.
we know, marijuana users are not arrested for speeding.
Well, so far that I did go to
But
one.
drunks are.
And that seems to be the big difference. But I did attend an event that was put on by the opponents, and they had a gentleman who was from Florida, but he had made the point that in some of the states where there is the availability now of marijuana, that they are picking up people for speeding. And again, I haven't had a chance to do research on that, but that was one of the comments he said. So it's something to look at. I mean,
Now, what about Minsure? Minsure was having a lot of trouble in terms of its website, much the same as the Affordable Care Act.
Right. There were definitely some major issues. I think most, I wouldn't say all of them, but some of them have been solved at this point. We know that there have been a lot of people that have signed up. And I know I was really impressed. I mean, it should be no secret that probably on the last day there were tons of calls coming in. And at that point, if you called in or went on the website, you could say that you had attempted, even on that day, and I think 36,000 people were taken care of in that way. They weren't able to actually sign in, but as long as they said that they had attempted, they will be treated as if they had filled out the application.
That number is up over 100,000 now.
Oh, yeah, so I think they've done an incredible job. I know, they've hired a lot more people working the telephones, so that they have made a lot of strides. Basically, I know I had been kind of given some heads up that their schedule was aggressive from a technical standpoint, but because of various regulations, no changes were made to try to put this off until things could be working. But I think they really have done a lot.
What happened to the warehouse tax?
That is definitely one of the things that we did do away with this year. That we have done, we did some tax cuts, and that was one. The one against the broadband was also taken out. So we've done.
So we repealed those?
Yes, those were repealed. Okay. So we've tried to be very. I don't know if the word is judicious, but we've tried to make changes to with knowing the fact that we are in a better situation financially right now.
Minimum pay?
The minimum wage is $9.50, and so I'm delighted that we got that passed. And Representative Winkler carried the bill for that, and he did get a message from the White House. I think it was the Chief of Staff, and I said, maybe if he had sent that earlier, we could have got it at 10:10, because eventually I think that's what we're going. I mean, the change that we put in, voted for this year, now puts us up at the, really at the top of the pack.
As opposed to being one of the 6 lowest states.
Exactly. So, but the deal is, because now there's movement to go above that, that's not going to last for very long. And as you know, it's really difficult to get a minimum wage bill passed.
Now, the session ends mandatorily here in May, right?
Right, on May 19th should be the last day.
So,
if we're not adjourned by then.
Realistically, what's the last day to introduce bills to get them on the floor by then?
It is too late. All the deadlines have passed. So, I mean, some people try to put amendments to bills on right now. There is a way for some bills, if they didn't make it through all of the committees, but at least they made the one, if they're still alive, the Rules Committee, if you go before them, just say why the bill was late. And I do have one, for instance, dealing with the railroad workers, motor carriers, and we were just juggling some issues trying to get some of the financial stuff deleted from the bill, which we did. I mean, there is no money. I have no fiscal bill with the bill right now, but I couldn't get it done before that last deadline. So I've asked to go before Rules to explain why we did that, and hopefully, if the Rules Committee approves that, then it will be going to the floor.
Viking Stadium?
That one I know is going to be put off till next year. I think we've had a lot this year. has been so intense, and it seems like every committee has had some really tough bills to get through. And that one, I think, that is an issue that I think can wait till next year.
So you're running for re-election. What do we have to look forward to in the next session?
As I said, the big deal for me is we need to get a major transportation bill done next year for sure. We were fighting really hard to get it passed this year. As I said, and there is a group called Move Minnesota that is a huge coalition of various organizations that support that. And I know you've probably seen some information and advertising from them about getting a bill passed. So that, to me, would be the most important thing from my perspective that we need to take care of next year.
And what else? Anything else that really is left hanging that we're moving into the next session with?
Well, the things that, I guess we're going to have to see what the bonding bill looks like. As I said, I'm thinking we are going to try to get, it will be a large bonding bill, but things that don't make it into that, we might look to see about other ways of doing that. From some of the other issues, trying to think of, energy is still up there.
We defeated some important attempted constitutional amendments last year.
Right.
The last election. So fortunately, I don't see any other constitutional amendments that are surfacing, but it should be more difficult to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot. Have we done anything about that this session?
No, we haven't. And there will be one more that, we will have a constitutional amendment probably going on during the next major election, having to do with the setting up a group to look at how the legislature is paid. And I think we had put that one off till 2016, as I recall. But right now, I don't think there's an appetite for doing much in the way of constitution, because I know somebody, well, actually the majority leader in the Senate wanted to put in that inflator for the minimum instead of doing
wage,
it, instead of including
but
that in the bill
died.
to do that. So and that was something that I think most legislators felt that is something that we should be responsible for, and we did include that. So I think that was a really good point.
30 seconds to give a message to your constituents.
Well, let's see. Just keep track of what we're going on right now. As I said, if there's a bill that you're interested in, please let me know as soon as possible, because we are doing bills almost every day on the floor now, and we've got about 3 weeks left of session. But again, I'm extremely proud of all that we have been able to accomplish this year.
Good. And we've been speaking with Representative Sandy Masin from District 51A, which is part of Burnsville, part of Eagan, and she's readily accessible to her constituents. You've been watching Access to Democracy. Join us again. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.